Some heartbeats are so small, you only hear them when the whole world has gone quiet. Cole Barrett almost missed this one. It was just after midnight when the storm swallowed the last lights along the Montana Ridge, burying the pines beneath heavy snow and turning the narrow road below his cabin into a white ribbon that vanished into darkness. Wind pressed against the windows with a low, restless moan. The fire had burned down to orange embers. Cole, 37, a former Navy SEAL who had learned long ago to sleep lightly, stood near the kitchen sink when he heard it. Scratch. He looked toward the front door. Nothing followed. He waited, listening past the ticking wall clock and the soft hiss of burning cedar. Then it came again. Scratch. Fainter this time. Cole crossed the room and opened the door. A gust of snow rushed across his boots, carrying the clean bite of frozen pine. At first, the porch looked empty. Then he saw the shape beside the railing. A German shepherd lay curled against the boards, half covered in wind-blown snow. Her sable coat was stiff with ice, her ears lowered, her body frighteningly still. Cole stepped outside without reaching for a coat. "Hey, girl." No response. He crouched and brushed snow from her shoulder. Beneath the frozen fur, there was warmth, but barely enough to feel. Her breathing came shallow and slow. "Stay with me." He slid his arms beneath her and stopped. Her abdomen was swollen. Not from illness. Pregnancy. Cole looked at her face again, noticing the faint mark around her neck where a collar had once rested. No tag. No leash. Nothing explaining how a pregnant German shepherd had crossed miles of mountain country during the worst storm of the season and ended up at his door. Her eyelids trembled. For 1 second, amber eyes opened and found his. There was no panic in them, only exhaustion, and something that felt strangely like relief. Cole carried her inside and laid her beside the fireplace on an old wool blanket. He worked quietly, warming towels, drying her fur, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Outside, snow erased his footprints almost as quickly as he had made them. Inside, the dog remained still. Cole rested 2 fingers near her chest. A heartbeat was there, weak but steady enough to give him hope. Then his hand moved across her belly. He froze. Something had touched his palm from beneath the fur. A tiny movement. He waited. Nothing. "Come on," he whispered. The cabin seemed to hold its breath with him. Wind moved around the eaves. A cedar log shifted softly in the fire. Cole reached for the old stethoscope inside his emergency kit and placed it carefully against her belly. At first, there was only silence. Then he heard it. Thump. Cole stopped breathing. Thump. Small. Fast. Fragile. A heartbeat hidden inside a mother who had somehow made it through the snow. Cole looked down at her, and for the first time in years, the silence in his house no longer felt empty. 3 hours earlier, Cole Barrett had been standing alone at the kitchen window, watching the first snow gather along the porch rail. The storm had arrived faster than the forecast promised, rolling down from the mountains until the world beyond his cabin disappeared behind white. By 9 that evening, nearly 8 inches covered the clearing. By 10, the county road below had vanished completely. Cole had seen worse weather in places where cold was only one item on a long list of things that could end a bad night. But this storm carried no urgency for him then. He had nowhere to go. No one was coming. That was how he preferred it. The cabin sat nearly 12 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by lodgepole pine and open mountain country. Cole had bought it after leaving the Navy, telling people he wanted peace. Peace sounded better than solitude. On the mantel above the fireplace rested an old photograph, turned face down beside a pair of worn dog tags. He had not looked at the photograph in months. He did not need to. Every face in it remained perfectly clear in his memory. Especially one. Cole poured coffee into a chipped ceramic mug and returned to the window. Snow swept sideways beneath the porch light. For a moment, he thought he saw movement near the tree line, perhaps a deer searching for cover. He leaned closer. Nothing. Only branches bending under the wind. Years earlier, he would have trusted his eyes without question. Now he had learned that memory could place shapes where none existed. The radio on the counter crackled with a weather warning. Mountain roads were closing. Temperatures would fall below 10 degrees before dawn. Residents were advised to remain indoors. Cole switched it off. The silence returned immediately. He had grown accustomed to silence after leaving the teams. At first, it had felt like freedom. No engines before sunrise. No voices through a headset. No boots moving down narrow hallways. But over time, quiet became something else. It gave old memories room to speak. 3 winters earlier, during his final deployment, Cole had made a decision he still carried into every cold night. A teammate had fallen behind during an evacuation through brutal weather. The order was clear. Keep moving. Cole obeyed. His friend never made it back. Everyone told Cole there had been no other choice. He had stopped arguing with them long ago, but believing them was different. Near 11:30, he placed another cedar log on the fire and noticed the snow outside had deepened. Then, at the far edge of the porch light, something moved again, this time lower to the ground. Cole stared through the glass until the darkness swallowed it. He opened the door and looked across the clearing. "Hello," the wind answered. He waited several seconds, then stepped back inside. Perhaps it had been nothing. Yet somewhere beyond the porch, hidden beneath the storm, for tired paws were already crossing the final stretch toward his cabin, carrying more than one fragile life through the snow. By the time Cole heard the scratching at midnight, the shape he had glimpsed near the tree line had crossed nearly 40 yards of open snow. How she managed it, he could not understand. The German shepherd now lay beside his fireplace, wrapped in dry wool, her sable coat slowly losing its crust of ice as warmth returned to the room. Cole knelt beside her with the stethoscope still in his hand, listening again to the faint rhythm beneath her belly. Thump. A pause. Then another. He counted carefully, afraid that moving too quickly might break whatever fragile balance had carried her this far. "You did not come all this way for yourself, did you?" he whispered. One of her ears shifted at the sound of his voice. Cole studied her more closely. She was perhaps 4 years old, lean beneath the pregnancy, with dark fur along her back and warm tan markings around her face and legs. Her paws were packed with melting snow. Around her neck, beneath the thick fur, ran a narrow, flattened line where a collar had rested for a long time. But there was no collar now, no identification tag, no clue to where she belonged. Cole reached for another towel, and the dog suddenly opened her eyes. Amber, tired, watchful, but clear. For several seconds, they simply looked at each other. Cole had seen frightened animals before. They usually pulled away from unfamiliar hands. This one did not. She watched him as though she had already made a decision about him somewhere out in the storm. "Easy, girl," he said. "You are safe here." He started to rise for more firewood. Her front paw moved. Weakly, almost clumsily, it settled across the toe of his boot. Cole stopped. The dog made no sound. She did not have to. He lowered himself beside her again. "All right, I am staying." Her eyes closed. Outside, the wind swept fresh snow across the porch, covering the trail she had made until there was no sign anyone had crossed the clearing at all. Cole glanced toward the window. The nearest occupied property was more than 5 miles away. The highway was farther. A healthy dog would have struggled through conditions like these. A pregnant one, exhausted and cold, should never have reached this cabin. Yet she had. He looked back at the empty place around her neck. Someone might be searching for her. Or perhaps no one was. For reasons he could not explain, the second possibility bothered him more. Cole reached for the old radio on the side table, hoping the weather channel might mention road conditions, when the German shepherd stirred. Her breathing changed. Not faster, deeper. Then her body tightened for several seconds before relaxing again. Cole set the radio down. His eyes moved to her belly. What was that? Another minute passed. The same tightening came again. This time she lifted her head and gave a soft, uncertain whine. Cole felt something cold settle beneath his ribs. The puppies were not simply alive. They might be coming. He checked his phone. One weak bar appeared, vanished, then returned. Cole searched for the nearest emergency veterinary number and pressed call. As the line struggled to connect, the dog reached for his boot again. He looked down at her paw resting there and realized she needed a name, even if only for tonight. "Mara," he murmured. Her amber eyes opened. Somewhere beyond the windows, the mountain disappeared beneath the storm. Inside the cabin, the call finally connected, and Cole heard a woman answer just as Mara's body tightened once more. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Dr. Rachel Mercer, the veterinarian covering emergency calls for the county that night. Her voice was calm, but the signal broke around every third word. Cole moved closer to the kitchen window, watching the single bar on his phone flicker. "Pregnant German shepherd," he said. "About 4 years old. She was outside in the snow. Extremely cold when I found her. She is breathing, and I can hear at least one fetal heartbeat. Rachel asked about Mara's gums, breathing, awareness, and whether she could stand. Cole answered each question carefully. Then Mara's body tightened again, and a low whine escaped her. That keeps happening, Cole said. There was a brief silence on the line. How far are you from town? About 12 miles. Do not try the county road. A tree came down near the north bend, and the plows have been pulled until the wind eases. Cole looked toward the dark window. 12 miles might as well have been 100. Then tell me what to do. Rachel instructed him to keep Mara warm gradually, not suddenly. To dry her completely, offer small amounts of lukewarm water if she was alert enough to drink, and keep the room quiet. Cole followed every word. He warmed fresh towels near the fire and placed them around Mara without crowding her. She accepted a few careful laps of water from a shallow bowl, then rested her head against the blanket. For several minutes, her breathing seemed steadier. Cole allowed himself to believe they were gaining ground. Then Mara stopped lifting her head. Mara. Her ear moved, but barely. Cole touched her shoulder. Stay with me. He checked the stethoscope again. Her heartbeat remained present, but weaker than before. Rachel's voice returned through a burst of static. Cole, listen carefully. She has been exposed to severe cold. She is exhausted, and if labor has started, her body is under tremendous strain. You need to be prepared that she may not have enough strength left. The words settled into the cabin heavier than the snow outside. Cole stared at Mara, and suddenly he was somewhere else. Another winter. Another voice telling him to keep moving. Another moment when staying had not been an option. He stood abruptly and reached for his truck keys. I can get her there. Cole, no. The road is blocked, visibility is almost zero, and emergency crews cannot reach that section right now. You could strand both of you. His hand tightened around the keys. He hated waiting. Waiting meant trusting things he could not control. There has to be another way. Rachel paused. Right now, you are the way. Keep her warm. Keep her calm. Watch her breathing. I will stay on the phone as long as the signal holds. Cole slowly set the keys down. He returned to the floor and sat beside Mara. The fire painted soft amber light across her damp fur. Her paw shifted until it touched his boot again. Cole covered it gently with his hand. You picked a terrible night to find me, he murmured. Mara opened her eyes for only a second. That was enough. Cole leaned closer. But you found me. Outside, something heavy cracked in the forest, followed by the distant fall of a snow-laden branch. The phone signal disappeared. Cole looked at the silent screen, then at Mara. Her body tightened once more, stronger this time. She lifted her head and searched for him. Cole moved beside her and placed his hand near her shoulder. I am right here. And this time, there was no order in the world that could make him leave. For a long moment, Cole remained on the floor beside Mara, listening to the storm press against the cabin and feeling the old memory return with a clarity he had spent 3 years trying to dull. It had been another winter night, colder than this one, when his team had been moving towards safety through weather that erased distance and direction. One of the men with him was Lieutenant Owen Hayes, 35, a quiet Texan who carried peppermint gum in every pocket and kept a photograph of his daughter tucked behind his identification card. Owen had been Cole's closest friend on the team, the kind of man who could sit beside you for an hour without speaking and somehow make the silence easier. That night, conditions had turned against them quickly. Visibility disappeared. Communications weakened. The team had to keep moving toward the extraction point before the weather closed completely. Owen fell behind. Cole wanted to go back. Every instinct in him demanded it. But the order came through clearly. Keep the team together. Keep moving. There was no safe way to turn around. Cole remembered looking back into the white darkness and hearing Owen's voice one final time through the radio. Go, Cole. I will be right behind you. He never was. The official report called the decision necessary. His commanding officer called it leadership. Owen's family never blamed him. None of that changed the empty chair Cole saw whenever he remembered coming home. Mara shifted beneath his hand, pulling him back into the cabin. Her amber eyes were open again, watching him through the firelight. Cole realized his fingers had closed around the dog tags hanging beneath his shirt. He released them slowly. I listened that night, he whispered. I did what I was supposed to do. Mara breathed out softly. Another wave of tension moved through her body, then passed. Cole adjusted the warm towel around her shoulders. And I have been wondering ever since whether doing the right thing is supposed to hurt that much. The words surprised him. He had never said them aloud. Not to the men who called. Not to the counselor he stopped visiting. Not even here, alone. Mara lifted her head slightly and rested her muzzle against his wrist. The gesture was weak, almost accidental, but Cole did not move away. Outside, the wind began to soften. Snow still swept past the windows, but the cabin no longer seemed buried beneath it. Cole checked Mara's breathing again, then placed the stethoscope carefully against her belly. At first, he heard only the faint sounds of movement. Then came the rhythm he had been waiting for. Quick, delicate, alive. Another sound seemed to overlap it, so faint he could not be certain. Cole closed his eyes and listened harder. Mara's paw settled against his knee. Not this time, he said quietly. Nobody gets left alone tonight. Then Mara suddenly raised her head. Her breathing changed, deeper and more focused than before. Cole moved closer, remembering every instruction Dr. Mercer had given him before the signal vanished. The fire cracked softly. The old clock marked another second. Mara looked directly at him, and Cole understood that whatever had carried her across those 40 yards of snow had not ended at his door. The hardest part of her journey was beginning now. The change in Mara was quiet at first. Her breathing deepened. Her paws pressed against the wool blanket, and every few minutes a wave of tension passed through her before slowly releasing. Cole stayed beside her, one hand resting near her shoulder, counting the seconds between each change the way he had once counted intervals in situations where patience mattered more than speed. There was nothing to command here, nothing he could force into happening. He could only watch, listen, and remain steady enough for Mara to trust him. The storm had weakened outside, but snow still covered the windowsills and buried the porch steps. Inside, the fire burned low and warm. Cole refreshed the towels, checked Mara's water, and listened again with the stethoscope. The tiny rhythms were still there. Then Mara suddenly turned toward the blankets behind her. Cole followed her gaze and saw something small nestled against the wool. For a second, he did not understand what he was seeing. A puppy. Tiny, dark, and impossibly still. Cole's heart seemed to stop before his thoughts caught up. Mara. She lifted her head immediately, exhausted but alert. She reached toward the puppy and began tending to it with the instinctive care of a mother who had crossed a frozen mountain carrying one purpose inside her. Cole moved closer without interfering, remembering Dr. Mercer's warning to let Mara do what came naturally unless something was clearly wrong. Seconds passed. The puppy remained quiet. Cole stared at its small body, waiting for movement. Nothing. The old fear rose inside him with terrifying familiarity. Too late. Those two words had followed him for 3 years. Too late to turn back. Too late to bring Owen home. Too late to change what happened. Come on, little one, Cole whispered. Mara continued gently nudging the puppy, refusing the silence. Then Cole saw it. A movement so small he almost believed the firelight had fooled him. The puppy's front paw shifted against the blanket. Cole leaned closer. A faint sound escaped it, barely more than a breath. Mara froze for half a second, then touched her nose to the puppy again. Another sound came. Stronger. Cole laughed once, softly, the sound breaking somewhere between relief and disbelief. There you are. Mara lowered herself around the newborn, shielding it with the warmth of her body. The puppy moved closer to her, alive and searching for comfort. Cole sat back on his heels and rubbed both hands across his face. He had forgotten what relief felt like when it arrived without a cost attached. For several minutes, the cabin became peaceful. The newborn rested against Mara. Her breathing settled. Cole allowed himself to believe the worst had passed. Then he noticed Mara's expression change. Her ears shifted backward. Her body tightened again, stronger than before. Cole reached for the stethoscope and listened carefully across her belly. One heartbeat, then another rhythm deeper beneath it. He moved the chest piece slightly and listened again. There was no mistake. At least one puppy was still waiting. Mara looked up at him, tired beyond anything words could describe, yet unwilling to surrender. Cole placed his hand beside her paw. All right, he whispered. We are not finished. Outside, the clouds began to thin somewhere beyond the mountains, but dawn was still hours away, and inside the little cabin, another fragile life was preparing to enter the world. The next hour asked more of Mara than Cole knew how to measure. She remained curled around the first puppy while the fire whispered beside them, her eyes closing between each wave of effort, then opening whenever the newborn made the smallest sound. Cole kept the room warm and quiet. He brought fresh towels. He offered water. He spoke only when Mara looked toward him, because somehow he understood that she did not need encouragement as much as she needed someone who would not disappear. Near 2 in the morning, a second puppy arrived, larger than the first and already stirring against the blanket. Mara gathered it close with the same exhausted tenderness. Cole released a breath he had not realized he was holding. 2, he whispered. Mara looked at him, then lowered her head again. But the night was not finished. Another hour passed before a third tiny shape joined the others. By then Mara's breathing had become slow and heavy. Her head rested against Cole's folded jacket, and the strength that had carried her through the storm seemed to be fading with every minute. Cole checked the stethoscope again. He listened across her belly, moving carefully, waiting for the quick rhythm he had heard earlier. There. One more. Faint, but present. There is another one, girl. Mara did not lift her head. Only her eyes moved toward him. Cole recognized that look. Not surrender. Exhaustion. The kind that came after someone had already given everything and discovered the world was asking for a little more. He placed his palm near her paw. You do not have to do this alone. Time stretched strangely after that. The wall clock continued ticking, but the cabin seemed to exist outside of ours. Cole watched the 3 puppies settle against their mother while Mara gathered what strength remained. Then, sometime after 3:30, the final puppy arrived. It was smaller than the others. Much smaller. And unlike its siblings, it made no sound. Mara turned immediately toward it. Cole felt the room become unbearably still. Come on. Mara nudged the tiny puppy gently. Nothing. Cole moved closer, careful not to disturb her. He watched for the rise of a chest, the twitch of a paw, anything. The fire shifted behind him with a soft crack. Outside, the wind had almost stopped. The entire mountain seemed to be waiting. Mara tried again, touching her nose to the puppy. Her amber eyes lifted toward Cole. He had seen that look once before tonight, out on the porch when she had been too weak to ask for anything except with her eyes. Help me. Cole reached for the clean towel beside him and followed the simple guidance Dr. Mercer had given earlier for supporting a newborn if Mara needed him. His hands were gentle, patient. The same hands that had spent years learning precision now held something that barely filled them. Stay with us, he whispered. Seconds passed. Then more. The puppy remained quiet. Cole felt the old words rising again. Too late. He refused them. Mara stretched her muzzle toward his hands and touched the puppy once more. Cole lowered his head, listening. Nothing. Then he remembered the stethoscope. He placed the chest piece carefully against the tiny body and closed his eyes. Silence. His throat tightened. He shifted it only slightly. Still nothing. Mara watched him. Cole waited one more second. Then it came. Thump. So faint he thought he had imagined it. He held perfectly still. Thump. Cole opened his eyes. Mara. Another beat followed, delicate but unmistakable. Then the puppy moved. A tiny paw flexed against the towel. A soft squeak entered the room. Mara lifted her head, and something changed in her face. The tension left her eyes. Cole smiled as the smallest puppy found its way toward the warmth of its mother and siblings. For puppies now rested beside Mara, each breathing, each impossibly alive. Cole sat against the floorboards, exhausted, his eyes wet in the firelight. Mara placed her head across his boot, as if she had finally decided she could sleep. He rested a hand gently between her ears. 3 years ago, winter had taught him that some endings could never be changed. Tonight, in a cabin buried beneath snow, it taught him something else. Sometimes staying could not rewrite the life you lost. Sometimes it simply made room for another life to begin. Morning arrived without ceremony. The storm that had ruled the mountain for most of the night faded into a pale silence, leaving the clearing buried beneath nearly a foot of fresh snow. Thin sunlight slipped through the eastern windows and stretched across the cabin floor until it reached the blankets beside the fireplace. Mara was asleep there, curled carefully around 4 puppies, her sable coat finally dry, her breathing slow and even. The smallest puppy rested beneath her chin. Every few seconds, its tiny body moved with a steady breath. Cole sat nearby with his back against the couch, too tired to sleep and strangely unwilling to close his eyes. He had spent hours listening for signs that something might change. Now the only sounds were the soft breathing of 5 dogs, the dying fire, and snow sliding gently from the roof. His phone regained service shortly after sunrise. Dr. Rachel Mercer called before Cole could reach for it. "How many?" she asked. Cole looked toward Mara. 4. A pause followed. "And the mother?" "Still with us." Rachel exhaled softly. "I am on my way as soon as the county clears the north bend." 2 hours later, the distant rumble of a snowplow moved through the valley. Near noon, an older 4-wheel-drive veterinary truck finally appeared between the trees. Rachel examined Mara and each puppy beside the fire, speaking quietly as she worked. She checked their breathing, warmth, hydration, and overall condition before sitting back on her heels. "They have been through a difficult night," she said. "But right now, they are stable." Cole looked at the smallest puppy. "Even that one?" Rachel smiled. "Especially that one. Small does not always mean weak." Mara opened her eyes at the sound of Cole's voice and rested her muzzle against his boot again. Rachel noticed, but said nothing. After she left, the cabin became quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Cole stood before the mantel. The old photograph was still face down beside his dog tags. He stared at it for a long time before picking it up. 4 men stood beneath a wide summer sky, tired and smiling. Owen Hayes beside Cole with one hand resting on his shoulder. Cole ran his thumb along the wooden frame. The familiar ache came, but this time he did not turn away from it. "You should have made it home," he whispered. There was no answer. There never would be. But for the first time, Cole understood that remembering Owen did not require living forever inside the night he lost him. He set the photograph upright on the mantel. Behind him came a small sound. One of the puppies had wandered several inches from Mara and was searching blindly across the blanket. Cole crouched and gently guided it back toward her warmth. Mara watched him, calm and trusting. Then the smallest puppy stretched one tiny paw across Cole's finger. He stayed there for a moment, surrounded by morning light, feeling that fragile weight against his hand. Outside, the snow still covered every road and every old footprint. But somewhere beneath all that white, the way forward was still there. By the 3rd week, winter had loosened its grip on the mountain. Snow still rested beneath the pines and along the northern side of Cole's cabin, but the porch boards were clear again, warmed each afternoon by a soft Montana sun. It was the same porch where Mara had once collapsed beneath the storm, carrying 4 fragile lives toward a door she had somehow chosen in the darkness. Now she lay beside that door with her head raised proudly, watching 4 German shepherd puppies tumble across the boards as if the world had never been cold. They had grown quickly. 3 were sturdy and adventurous, forever climbing over Cole's boots or chasing each other beneath the porch bench. The smallest remained noticeably smaller, but Dr. Rachel Mercer had been right. Small did not mean weak. Cole had named him Scout because he was always the first to wander towards something unfamiliar, even when his short legs made the journey twice as difficult. That morning, Scout discovered Cole's old Navy sweatshirt folded near the doorway and immediately claimed it as his bed. Cole found him asleep across the faded fabric, paws stretched over the lettering, while Mara watched from a few feet away. "Of course you picked that one," Cole murmured. Mara's tail tapped once against the porch. She wore a new leather collar now. Hanging from it was a simple brass tag. Mara. Home. Cole had considered writing his phone number beneath the name, but when the engraving was finished, that single word had felt more important. No one had answered the notices Rachel helped him place. No missing dog reports matched Mara. No owner came forward. The mystery of where she had come from remained, but Cole had stopped needing an explanation. Some questions were not doors meant to be opened. Some were simply paths that brought something lost to the place it needed to find. Inside the cabin, Owen's photograph remained upright on the mantel. Cole no longer turned it face down before bed. Some mornings he even spoke to it, usually about nothing important. The weather, the puppies, how Scout had somehow carried one of Cole's socks beneath the kitchen table. Grief had not disappeared. It had changed shape. It no longer filled every room. Cole stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee and sat beside Mara. She leaned against his leg, warm and solid. Scout woke, climbed awkwardly into Cole's lap, and settled against his chest. Cole placed 2 fingers gently over the puppy's tiny ribs. Beneath them came a familiar rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Stronger now. Steady. Cole closed his eyes and listened. Weeks earlier, that sound had been nearly lost beneath a storm. Now it belonged to morning sunlight, puppy paws, warm coffee, and a house that no longer seemed built for one man. Mara rested her head on his knee. Cole opened the door behind them and left it open. One by one, the puppies wandered inside. Mara followed last, pausing beside him before crossing the threshold. Cole touched the brass tag at her collar and smiled. She had arrived at his door asking for shelter without ever making a sound. Somewhere between that frozen night and this quiet morning, Cole realized she had brought shelter with her. Not from winter, from the emptiness he had mistaken for peace. He watched Scout disappear into the cabin after his mother, then looked once toward the bright mountains beyond the porch. Some lives are saved with medicine, some with warmth, and sometimes two wounded souls simply stay beside each other long enough to remember that home is not the place where the storm ends. It is the place where no one has to face it alone.